there. I want to normalize for you a little bit the experience that we are probably all going through in this pandemic. If you think back to the initial shock of having to shelter in place, was quickly followed by lots of good humor on social media platforms, jokes about teachers, aka moms teaching their children from home, being fired for drinking on the job, and kids being suspended or kicked out of school for fighting or not completing homework, things like that were funny puns and jokes about the current circumstances. Funny pictures of people working from home in interesting attire or lack of attire, and we had a good laugh. And then the shelter in place orders were extended, and we started to see the humor on social media began to drop. And then we started to hear news of things opening up, which gave a sense of hope. There was the light at the end of the tunnel. We're also going to throw in here all of the racial tensions that surrounded the murder of George Floyd. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that here because the purpose of my videos is pandemic coping. It does serve a purpose to say we added some more stress in there as a culture and as a nation and as a world. So that dimmed the light at the end of the tunnel. And then as we opened up, we had this influx of positive COVID cases, and they began to pull back on the opening up. And so we went from optimism to kind of hopelessness, back to optimism, and then despair and hopelessness. And people's energy started to really wane, their motivation, their ability to stay humorous on social media platforms was severely affected. And I look at that as evidence of a collective experience that we are all going through, not just as a nation, but as a world, as this pandemic, by its definition, is worldwide. So I want to encourage you to use self-compassion and have grace with yourself and others as we wrestle with how to move forward when the light at the end of the tunnel keeps moving further and further away. And sometimes it feels like we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's moved so far away or been extinguished. And that leaves people with a sense of despair, discouragement, hopelessness, and that robs us of energy. So it becomes very hard to continue to maintain forward momentum and lifted spirits. And rather than criticizing yourself for those experiences, I want you to use self-compassion and talk to yourself like you would a friend and say, you're having a normal human response to a pandemic. You're having a normal human response to ever-changing circumstances and messages about what this pandemic means. You're having a normal human response to the opening and closing of our economy. You're having a normal human response to transitions and circumstances that are outside of your control. And you're doing the best you can. And have grace with yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have days where you feel cranky or mean or despairing, and you won't be your best self. None of us can be our best self 100% of the time because we're imperfect beings. And now in a pandemic, the ability to be our best self is even more challenging. And that's a normal human response to living in a pandemic. So I hope that you can feel that self-compassion and that grace for yourself and others, and lighten up on the pressure and just let yourself recognize you're doing the best you can and others are doing the best they can. And our capacity is shifting from day to day because of the circumstances that we are living through.